Okay, fab. So hi everyone. Again, a very warm welcome to you all. My name is Hazel Jane and I'm an entrepreneur engagement manager for a company called Tech Nation. I'm also a convener for the Can Do Collective. But today isn't really about me. This is a session, a panel session about equality, diversity and inclusion. And I just really like to kind of preface all of these sessions, because it's not the first time that I've had, this kind of conversation, just by saying that or acknowledging that this is really just the kind of start of a much, much bigger conversation. And we're never going to be able to cover everything that is equality, diversity and inclusion in just an hour session. It's just not possible. And particularly in this kind of new world where there's these really shiny things, you might see a shiny poster that talks about diversity and inclusion, but actually behind that is hundreds of years of pain and real trauma and human stories of just being treated absolutely terribly. So it's very difficult to kind of jump in and say, this is what it is, and this is what it is, and this is, where it's at. So just to kind of say that in advance, that we're here to continue the conversation and to have the conversation. And that's really important. It's just a kind of ongoing reminder of how crucial this work is and how many different facets there are. And actually what's great about today's session is that we're looking at really quite different sections or parts of what diversity and inclusion work is about. So that should be really nice to get kind of different perspectives. So I am thrilled today to be joined by Emma Walker, Lesley Laird and Chuks Ododo. So this is an interactive session. Please do use the Q&A. I'll be monitoring it throughout, so don't feel like you have to wait till the end. I will, of course, open up to questions at the end. But if something comes up, if you want to respond to something that someone's saying, it's live, we're here, it's 3 o'clock on is it Tuesday? So do take advantage of that and join the conversation. So I will keep an eye on the Q&A. But that's kind of everything for me as an introduction. I'm really keen to jump into the incredible experts that we have with us today. So if you could all just introduce yourselves very briefly, maybe say a little bit about your kind of career path and a bit about the work that you're doing now. Lesley, can I start with you?
Yeah, happy to. I'm Lesley Laird. I'm currently the director of Equate Scotland. We're an organisation focused on students, women and employers in the STEM sector. I've had a very diverse career. I started off in the high-tech electronics sector, working for organisations like IBM, Digital, Motorola. So I have come really from a kind of manufacturing tech background, where I've held HR policy roles. I then went into a career in local government and national politics, and I am now in another iteration of my career where I'm putting all that knowledge and experience as a transferable skill into my current role as director of Equate Scotland. And I'm delighted to be here this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lesley. Chuks, can I ask you next?
Thank you very much. My name is Chuks Ododo, the Community Connector Manager for DataCorp. DataCorp is a research charity in Edinburgh providing data literacy analytical training to young people between the age of 9 to 19, and also to adults who want to upskill and reskill in data. DataCorp was founded in 2019, and we focus on closing the data divide and attainment gap in Scotland. And we're happy to be the first charity to have a SQA accredited center to award diploma in data analytics. And I'm from a marketing background, work with private sectors, also work in local government, also in housing, and also the digital support program. I'm also passionate about community, very active in a community engagement in the community where I live. And also I'm a true Scot. Why I say I'm a true Scot in the sense that I've studied in almost all the major cities across Scotland. That's me.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And Emma.
Hi, thank you for having me here today. My name's Emma Walker and I'm the Regional Manager for Autocon Scotland. So Autocon is a global IT consultancy and social enterprise that exclusively employs autistic consultants. In addition to the consultancy side, we also have a training arm where we reach out to different employers and we provide training about neurodiversity to help them attract, recruit and retain their own neurodiverse employees. I guess my background is predominantly in HR. I've also worked in IT consultancy on both sides. I worked as an IT consultant and also in IT consultancy as a client relationship manager. But my passion for what I do comes from the fact that my oldest son is autistic. So I'm really passionate about helping employers make their workplaces more inclusive.
Amazing, thank you. So I just really wanted to start off this session by kind of distilling or getting a feel for really the kind of the problems that you tackle. So the way that I see this is, to solve a problem, we have to understand what that problem actually is. And even as a woman, so as someone that belongs to an oppressed group of some kind, I didn't just instinctively or intrinsically know all of the biases that stood against me or all of the problems that I might face in my career or in my life. And those are things that I've really had to kind of learn along the way. If anyone's watching, I will always plug the book Invisible Women, which is absolutely incredible and talks about all of the data gaps and all of the different ways that society is basically kind of put against women. So really, really recommend. I can see someone in the chat has said, a fantastic book. Yes, it is. But what I really want to understand is we've got 3 different people from 3 different organizations. What are the problems that you're facing? What is the problem? Lesley, can I jump back to you?
Well, I absolutely would go along with your opening statement. Having worked in the tech sector, engineers used to say to me all the time as I was coming in an HR capacity, so what is the problem that you're trying to fix? And what is the root cause of your problem? And that is really a philosophy that I use really every day in my work. We can do lots of activity and we can do lots of things in the STEM space, but the question you really have to ask is, addressing the root cause? And I suppose my reflections are that in many respects, we've no lack of enthusiasm, but what we do have is a lack of momentum and real change. And I think we can apply that not just to women in STEM, but in many of the other aspects that we're going to touch on, I think, in today's discussion. So the question that I always have then is, if you have to look at change, then what is your compelling reason for change? Because unless you can motivate people to change, to have that compelling reason, it's very hard to shift the dial in any direction. And that's really what we've seen. And I'll give an example of that. So when all of my working life, I probably campaigned for flexible working and working from home. And I've heard every argument you could possibly even think of, and probably a few that you wouldn't even have thought of, that people would say why that just couldn't be done. But we had a global pandemic and that really caused a lot of things to change very, very rapidly. That was a compelling reason for change. We could no longer work the way we used to work. We had to work from home. So arguments that were going on for 30 years suddenly changed in a matter of weeks, 3 weeks. In 3 weeks, people were working from home that previously we said we couldn't. So the argument for me always is, well, what is the compelling reason for change and why should we do things? And the other question I always like to ask is, what bad thing will happen if we do something different? And what bad thing will happen if we don't? Well, the question for me right now is, if we don't do something different about the way we use our talent in our society, then we will simply not be able to address all the issues and concerns that we are currently facing. We can see skill shortages all across different sectors, but we still are not really utilising all the talents of all of our people. And that, for me, is something that we really do need to start to address. And I know that Chuks and that Emma will also touch on that in theirs. But if we go to the root cause, then we talk about in STEM the leaky pipeline, where traditionally when girls start school, they are equally competitive with boys in most of the subject areas, and especially tech. But when you get into high school, that's where the drop-off rates start to happen. And this is where other factors like social norms, career influencers, parents' carers do start to have an influence on how women view the STEM sector. But even if we get through the school education period and we get into university, Unfortunately, when we get into the working environment, women encounter a lot of barriers. Some are very blatant in terms of sexual harassment. We can talk a lot about that, but some of them are the kind of microaggressions that just really wear people down. And a very telling statistic is that even after graduation, 73% of women 3 years into the career have dropped out of the STEM sector. So these are some of the challenges that we face. I could talk more about that, but I want to give some time, obviously, to others to bring their points, but happy to come back, to some of these points. But that just gives a flavour, I think, of some of the kind of issues we need to try and grapple.
Thank you so much for that. And I sort of vaguely knew that, but I didn't know that it was that high, the number of people who are leaving STEM. That's such a shame. But thank you for sharing all of that, Lesley. And Emma, can you talk a bit about the problem that you're solving?
Yeah, love to. I mentioned that we're a social enterprise. So the social issue or problem, as you call it, that we're trying to address is the fact that only 16% of autistic adults are currently in full-time employment, although 77% say they want to work. So it's a really disappointing statistic. So there's so much talent sitting out there just going to waste because people can't get into jobs. So I think from our perspective, one of the main problems is all the barriers right across the recruitment process. A lot of them aren't intentional. I mean, it's predominantly due to lack of understanding, lack of knowledge about neurodiverse conditions. I think if people understood more, they would do more about it. But for those of you who like data, we actually did a survey quite recently, and it brought some, well, I don't think they were surprising results, but they might be surprising to some people. Some of the results said that out of all the people we contacted, 1 in 10 people feel they can't disclose their diagnosis in the workplace. And 33% have concerns about being treated adversely. And 13% are concerned that it'll have a negative impact on the career prospects in the company they're working in. So people are out there in organisations, and even if they can get into employment, they might not be supported. So because of that, people are not fulfilling their potential. They may have great skills, but they may not have the support to enable them to work to their full potential. Or they may be masking the neurodivergent condition, which means they become increasingly tired and may burn out and end up leaving the company anyway. So again, I think it all boils down to lack of understanding and education about neurodiverse conditions.
Thank you so much for that, Emma. And Chuks, how about you? What are you solving?
Thank you very much. DataCorp, like I mentioned before, is an organization providing a data literacy and analytical training to both young people and adults. We are solving the problem of deprived and vulnerable people in our society. We're focusing on those group of people that we currently identify as a has-to-reach community. That's what they call us. So we are actually in the position of where we position ourselves as the vehicle driving the government's digital strategy to the people at the grassroots. We have seen Scottish government throwing so many fantastic strategy, polish so many programs, but who are the vehicle driving this program from the top down to the bottom? We have seen a very similar situation where government will take so many bosses of having done so much in their strategy, but how does those strategy benefit the people at the bottom? The deprived community, the vulnerable group, the people in the homeless sector, the people who have been disengaged, who have failed, our society have failed them. Who is reaching out to them? That is where DataCorp fit in. We are providing this training to these people because we conducted a survey in 2019 where we started our program, and we see that there's a serious gap between those who are data illiterate and data illiterate. There's a huge gap between those who can make money with data and those who does not know anything about data. And the good thing is that over the years since 2019, we are able to create a community who are enthusiastic and willing to be part of data economy. And we have found out that, yeah, the government are proven all this strategy. Where do our people fit in? Where our people are seriously underrepresented in digital economy. In tech sector, we are underrepresented. But the good news is that in our programs today, we have 55 men to 45 women. And our last program, which is Introduction to Data Science for Business, we have a program where we have 55 women against 45 men. So those are the impact we are making. These are things you hardly see in other programs. People struggle to get female gender balance in their program, but that is not an issue. We are working with the community who have showed interest to be able to be part of the digital economy. But what are our challenges? We are providing a program, a training for people, but we don't have opportunity for organization to open up internship opportunity where those trainers, people participating in our program can go there and have a practical experience. We are trained people, go to the job, oh, sorry, you don't have experience. How do you get experience where you don't have an access opportunity? So we are not having this opportunity. And I'm using this opportunity to speak to so many people. We need to do much to engage the deprived. It is not about providing robust policy, throwing so many fantastic programs, but how does it benefit people at the bottom? Do we want them to be left out from digital economy? The answer is no. But what are we doing to engage these people? Okay, typical example is this. My community is deprived, trapped in digital poverty, still underrepresented in digital economy, very below the standard in terms of digital skill. But here we are. Government are not talking about AI strategy. We are talking about AI strategy when my community is still deprived, still trapped in trying to try to get out of this digital poverty. And we're talking of AI. So the society is running ahead of us. So what do? We need to run in a pace whereby we run with others if we want Scotland to be fair for everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And I feel really struck by what you said there. And there's something in my mind, and maybe this is a really controversial thing to say, or maybe it's not, which is that you can't really have diversity and inclusion if you're not, as an organization, interested in social justice. Like you can't really make shiny things and build nice initiatives if you're not interested in the fact that the government and the history has failed particular members of our society. And that's quite uncomfortable, I think, for a lot of people to then feel like actually it's not even about, we're hiring from certain pools or whatever, and actually saying politically we've made a stance about this. I see something, they don't think that's controversial. I'm glad to hear that. But it feels a bit controversial to say that, so even though I think the word social justice hasn't quite reached diversity and inclusion yet. Diversity and inclusion feels quite nice, it feels quite gentle. Social justice is maybe the next kind of step for us. But just kind of moving on from that, and something that I'm really curious about is this idea that D&I work and certainly kind of culture work has exploded over the last 2 or 3 years. Maybe even more like 5 years now. And as Lesley said at the beginning, all these things like flexible working and, those opportunities, that's completely changed. And there are more opportunities there. So there is a lot of change in the water. There's no denying that. But from my perspective, the pandemic caused a lot of those changes to happen. And a lot of the other changes that I see, just from a very personal kind of note, are quite grassroots led. It's individuals entering organizations and saying, I want to do this better. I want to build a D&I group. I want to we have a diverse minds group at Tech Nation. That wasn't put in place by any of the exec team. That was put in place by someone who joined the organization. So it feels to me quite grassroots. But I'm really interested to know, in your experiences, in the work that you've been doing for however many years, does it feel like people are much, much more receptive to what you're doing now? Do you feel like it's easier to kind of get people involved with what you're doing? Chuks, can I go back to you on this? Is that all right?
Yeah, thank you very much. When we started, it was difficult, though we have made some progress, but there are still challenges trying to get organizations to support what we do. So that challenge is still there. Trying to knock at the doors, open door for people. So it's something that sometimes amaze me, or what do I say? Sometimes it's shocking, whereby you have this idea and the people go to there, oh, that's a fantastic idea, or it's good, but to support this idea is a problem. And sometimes people from my background struggle to get their things up and running, in the sense that my surname to some people, it's already put me on that disadvantaged position. And these are things we have experienced over the years, trying to create so many solutions. We started in the housing sector, trying to create solutions for the vulnerable group in the housing. That was a fantastic idea. We pitched it everywhere. And there was a lot of people recommended that's a very fantastic idea, but we didn't get support. So we have to kill the program and start over the data cock. And data cock has been crawling over the years, doing wonderful things and begging, knocking at the different doors to help us. But now we want to work. We are still struggling to get people to support us, because you mentioned about equality and diversity. How do we want to make our organization fair? The diversity and inclusion we are preaching, is that just a policy statement, or we are really doing the work? Because if we want to make our society to be diverse and inclusive, to make it fairer for everyone, there should be more open doors to the deprived and vulnerable group to be part of us. I see some of these policies as kind of excluded for certain people, running a certain speed and leaving the right people behind and who are part of the society. So we facing our challenges. We are very eager to be able to reach out to so many community. For example, our vision is to have a center in all the local authority in Scotland. But where are we not now? We are still struggling. But so far, in the last few months, we have been able to engage some organization to be able to support, like Data Lab. They have been fantastic. Public Health Scotland are there supporting us. But we need more organization to support us. Who are the Scottish government that is hearing our voice? Who are the top there that are hearing the voice of organization that want to reach out to the grassroots? Nobody. So we are this opportunity to let obviously we need to do more to be able to get along and carry the people of the deprived areas and the vulnerable group along in the digital economy. We cannot afford to leave them behind. Thank you.
Thank you. And certainly not the most kind of positive response, but I really appreciate your honesty. There is still struggle, and that's really obvious that even though we're maybe having the conversations, and we're having the conversations much more than we used to, I don't know if that's necessarily equaling as much action as we would like. And Emma, how does that feel for you? Does it feel similar, or do you think it's been really positive? What's it like?
We've seen a huge increase in neurodiversity. And I guess Autocon started in Berlin in 2011, so we've just had our 10-year anniversary. We started off really small. The company was actually started by a father who had an autistic son who had difficulty gaining employment, even though he had a real sort of passion and ambition for a career in IT. Anyway, since then we have grown. We've now got 18 offices worldwide. We've got circa 300 employees, of which more than 200 are autistic. So we've definitely grown in strength and numbers. But I guess without sounding too cynical, I think some of our growth or some of the interest in neurodiversity recently isn't really about leaders' interest in their corporate social responsibility, but it's more about the lack of talent. Where do they go to find talent? As Lesley mentioned earlier, the talent shortage in the skills tech sector, organisations are having to think wider. So they're reaching out to the neurodiverse workforce and beginning to recognise the skills that these people can bring to their organisation. And that's the other reason for the increase. Because there's more education about neurodiversity now, people are realising that it's not just helping these people, it's also helping the organisation. All the cognitive strengths that these people can bring and that diversity of thought they bring to a team really adds a lot of value to teams and a lot of value to organisations. So leaders are beginning to see the competitive advantage you can have by having a diverse team. So that's created a lot of interest. So for us, it's been really positive.
And Emma, can I just touch on that a little bit more? How does that feel for you? The idea that people are being employed because we're so desperate, we need someone, you're someone, we're casting our net even wider. Do you think, well, actually, if people are getting into work, that's positive and like the work can be done from there? Or is there some resentment there of like, we've been here the whole time and we could have been doing great work the whole time and you're coming to us now? How does it feel for you?
I guess there is that element, but I think it's just positive that people are actually beginning to value the strengths, abilities that these people can bring into an organisation. So you have to think about it, the positive side of it. And because of that, people are reviewing their recruitment process. Why are these people not working before now? What can we do differently? How can we make our workplace more inclusive? And the education that's going on in lots of organisations about the small tweaks that you can make, and it makes a difference between somebody who can work really successfully and add a lot of value to an organisation, just to them not working at all.
That's great, thank you. Lesley, I feel like it's been so long since I've heard your voice. So how about you? Do you feel, you've been doing this for a really long time. Do you feel like there's been loads of change and it's really positive and people are really receptive, or is it a bit slower than that?
I think there's a couple of aspects. I think it's always shades of grey. I think what we are seeing is organisations now taking at the top level more leadership. So organisations are recognising that really that the awareness of inclusion and diversity is important from a business case perspective as much as anything else. And I think that is a good thing. But actually, for real change to become embedded, that requires leadership at every level. And the question then for all of us, going back to your question about social justice and some of the points that Chuks has made, is that it's endemic on all of us to raise our voice, to lend our voice to those causes, to ensure that there is that more equal opportunity for all. One of the aspects that we need to consider when you're looking at that is, well, what is the leadership at every level? So if we start, with the direction that government sets the leadership and the tone of voice for the country, whether that's at UK or at Scottish level or European level, wherever you look, you can learn a lot by the tone of voice and the type of policies that are developed. But policy development traditionally, and then this is going back to Caroline Perez's book, is not done through that intersectionality lens. So therefore, the policy making in its current form is flawed. You are not really trying to address, going back to the root cause, what is the problem that you're trying to fix? And if you're not taking that intersectional approach to your policy making and your investment choices as a result of those changes in policy, then you're not really going to achieve the outcome that we all say that we want. And therefore, leadership is about making, I think, now some different choices. We're coming into a period where we talk about the green revolution, opportunities to open up new jobs, new careers. We talk about just transition. But what does that look like? What does that feel like on the ground? And I think, Chuck is closer to that than many of us, I'm sure, here today, and can really articulate that well. But the question is, unless people in Chuck's community are feeling the impact of those policy changes and really feeling the impact of what that change in society is meaning for them at that personal level, then we haven't made the progress that we wanted to make. And clearly, Chuck's frustration is clear, and also the points, that Emma is making around how we build more inclusive workplaces. So we've been doing work at Equate with SWAN, which is another organisation that supports women who have neurodiverse concerns. And many of them have had to drop out of the workplace because they felt, first of all, they were not diagnosed ever, because women do a great job of masking that condition. And secondly, they then find themselves in an environment where continuing to mask that becomes a huge strain and actually quite an impact on their health and well-being. So if we're going to say we're going to be different, and back to my opening statement, what's the problem that we're really trying to fix? And what is the root cause? And therefore, what changes in the leadership agenda are you taking to address those root cause issues? So while we can applaud some of the work that's happening, I think it also suggests there's a lot of homework still to be done.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. And I've got all these questions prepared, but it's also these amazing questions in the chat at the moment. So I think I'm going to pause my questions just for a moment and ask the first one that came in, which is, how do you tackle fake equality, diversity and inclusion? So that's a workplace that does the bare minimum for EDI, to jump through hoops, tick boxes. We know all about this. You know, people want to fit into policy if that's what they really have to do, but in turn that could actually make EDI worse. Does anyone want to jump in on that? Yeah, that would be great.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you very much. You know, when this is sometimes I just smile at the way people are jumping into diversity and inclusion at workplace. Everybody want to sing the same song, just like as they sang the song of we are equal opportunity organization, but that actually is actually what's obtainable in the industry. And for example, when you take about equal opportunity, what does equal opportunity mean to a deprived community or somebody like me? Equal opportunity means that I'm going to compete with somebody who is already at advantage. I'm already at a disadvantage, and I'm going to compete in equal criteria with somebody who is already at advantage. So what does that leave me? It leaves me that I'm still deprived, even though we are singing the slogan, equal opportunity. Now we are moving into diversity and inclusion. Is diversity and inclusion, is the organization really doing what it's supposed to do, or they just want to jump into that policy slogan that we are inclusive organization? If we want to actually be fair and honest in this policy, what we need to do is to, the inclusion and diversity has to be part of the organizational DNA. It has to be as part of the internal culture. There's internal diversity and also external diversity. What do I mean? It has to be culture of the organization. The person that is recruiting our organization should be able to know, should be able to embrace that culture. Be able to be part of that culture, because sometimes organizations will say equal opportunity or diversity and inclusion. Does the HR person recruiting people, is he looking at that as part of what he's recruiting? Is he looking at people different background in recruitment, or is just looking at people who can do the job, or is just excluding some people? So it has to be part of the internal diversity. Then externally, it has to be seen that how does he engage with diverse community? How does he engage with a different range of people, different sexual orientation, different age group, different ethnicity, and also how does he engage in a wider audience? Okay. We also need to have a very good mechanism or something like a transparent system of measuring organizational performance in terms of inclusion and diversity. We have to be part of our KPI to see how organization is performing in terms of diversity and inclusion. It's not only about singing or creating a workshop here and there. After some months, then the story ends. We still go back to the same old story. So there's a huge lot to do. And when you mention about diversity and inclusion, it does not end in just recruiting few hands to do the job, but it has to be reflected in our decision-making table. In the Scottish government, the AI strategy, digital strategy, how diverse is that structure? How many people, how many diverse communities and different genders are represented in those communities? So this thing has to filter from the top to the bottom. The diversity has to reflect in everything we do, just from our decision-making table to the implementation, even to the lowest people in our organization. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that. Lesley, Emma, do you have anything that you want to add to that in terms of jumping through hoops, ticking those boxes?
I think the key thing, which Chuks has touched on really, is the starting process, where you really need to have to understand what is the organisation really looking to do. Is it genuinely embracing the ED&I agenda? And that's one of the things that Equate is very passionate about ensuring when we work with organisations, that there is a genuine energy to actually address the whole aspect of that. That includes the culture, that includes processes, and particularly we would be strong advocates of around things like blind recruitment processes, where people are presented with the information about candidates, but not necessarily about any of their personal characteristics. And that would include things like names, because then you start to have a much more open and transparent view of looking at candidates on their merits. I do take absolutely Chuck's earlier point too about how do people get experience? Well, you need employers to actually come forward as part of that inclusion agenda to say they're prepared to try to do something different. We hear a lot about, we've tried to recruit and no one applies, or we've gone and we've just not managed to attract candidates. But there is that saying, if you only ever fish in the same pond, you'll never catch the same fish. But equally, I think the onus is on employers to actually go out and say openly and publicly that they are looking to have that diverse workforce. But that's only the start of the journey. And we do call it a journey because employers then need to look at the culture they have in their organisation. They need to set out what is the tone and the language, what is the aspects of policy that they're going to ensure works effectively. Because as we find with women who join organisations that say all those things, when they actually get in, the lived experience can be very, very different. And that's why you see the turnover. And I'm sure, Chuks and Emma could reflect that very similarly for their groups. So it's not enough to say we've got a policy. The questions you have to always ask are to get underneath that. And again, for me, that comes back to the data. What's the data telling us? We rely on science all through. If I go back to COVID, be led by the science, be led by the data. Well, the same is true of equality, diversity, inclusion. What does the organisation's data tell? What story is it telling? And that really gives you a much better insight to just the words on the page.
Thank you. I feel like there's such a great point in there around like the data versus, or like the policy versus something else. So actually it's nice to have something written. It's nice to have a pledge or a promise. Things like the B impact assessment, if any of you have seen that Scotland Can Be produced that. So if you're not able to become a B Corp, you can still kind of see how you rank in terms of becoming one. So that it's great to have tools in place where you're able to measure, you're able to say, yeah, these are the things that we'd like to do, but then you have to see if it's working, and that involves that constant feedback loop and not being afraid of what people are then going to say back. So it's just a fantastic point, Lesley. And Emma, did you have anything that you wanted to add to that?
I think it's just the companies that don't look at making their workplaces inclusive, they're going to miss out. They'll see other companies who are going down that route, and they're having diverse teams who think inclusively, and which brings creativity and innovation to the teams. So the ones who are just recruiting the same people in the same mold continuously, they're going to get the same results. They're not going to get that competitive advantage that the companies that create the diverse teams are going to gain.
Perfect, thank you. There's a sort of follow-on question here in the chat, which is what process or what are the high-level steps in identifying the gap or needs assessment when a policy is being developed? I don't know if anyone's got any comments on that in terms of, for those existing organisations, what do you think they should be doing first to say, okay, actually, are we doing enough and is this working? Do you have any advice for them? I don't know if anyone wants to.
Well, first of all, you've got to know what you've currently got, and many organisations will not even be able to tell you that, not even in terms of things like pay differential or tenure or promotion. So the first thing you've got to start is, back to that question, understanding actually what does your current workforce comprise of, and what is the problem that you're then trying to fix, and how do you want to measure that? If I give an example, we did our 7 manifesto asks, which says against any economic policy or strategy, there should be a definition about who's the policy for as that output. So from a business environment, you wouldn't have a strategy that didn't determine key milestones, and you wouldn't determine what the output was at the other end. And if I give an example of that, we say we need more computer science graduates, and I'll refer you obviously to the Mark Logan report. But if you look at the strategy from an input perspective, we actually don't have enough raw resources in the teaching community to actually deliver what we say needs to pop out at the other end, at the end of that training cycle. So we've got a shortage of the RSC's report, Royal Society of Engineering's report highlights, you know, we're down 25%, I believe, in terms of teachers' numbers in computer science, but that can also be read across other areas of STEM. If you look at where teaching resources can then be accessed, and back to what communities currently have computer science teachers and who doesn't have computer science teachers, then again you're opening up questions about diversity and inclusion at the basic curriculum level. And therefore, further down the line, do not be surprised that you end up with the same labour market segregation issues that we've still currently got. So unless we are prepared to shift everything to a different way of working, then we're not going to see the change that we all say we want. Making these types of decisions are conscious decisions, and it's not easy. But if we want to have a different outcome, you have to do something different. And if we look at the strategies that we currently have, we do not do intersectionality as part of those development, and we do not measure outputs in terms of looking and tracking those changes. So there's a huge amount of work to be done in the policy arena, both at national and local government, but also actually at an organisational level. And that's the conversations that we need to have, so that, you know, each of us is asking within our own organisation some of those hard questions.
Thank you so much, Lesley. That's, yeah, such a great answer. Does anyone want to add anything to that, or does that feel comprehensive?
When first of all, you need to identify when you are making a policy. You say, what actually do you want to achieve by making such policy? Then that will help you to be able to say, okay, at the end of the day, how am I going to evaluate that I have actually made impact, or have I made some level of progress on that policy? Excuse me. A typical example like data corps. When we want to recruit people into data training, we have that baseline survey. What we want to do with that baseline survey, to understand people have their background knowledge in terms of data. Have they used data before? What do they understand by data? When we do that background survey, then we start the program. At the middle, we do another evaluation to see how people have progressed. What is the level of people understanding from where we started to the middle where we are. Then at the end of the program, we'll also do the evaluation to know what impact have we made in that program from where we started and to where we have ended. So when we create this policy, for example, diversity and inclusion, you should be able to have a way of evaluating it. Okay, over the last 6 months, how diverse and inclusive have we been? What kind of changes have we brought in terms of recruitment? What are the gender balance in terms of our recruitment, in terms of a workforce? What is gender balance in terms of different role? What is gender balance in terms of our decision-making table? You know, you look at our valuation, and at the end of the day, it's a working process. Begin to evaluate as we progress. But a situation whereby we just make this policy just to fulfill all righteousness and nothing is done, then we end up not doing anything, but just only creating a slogan.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. And Emma, anything to add on that one?
The only thing I would add is that I think Scottish Government have got a big increasing the understanding of autism campaign, which I think is a good start in the area that we're working in. I guess it's still got quite a ways to go.
Mm-hmm. But I think what I'm really hearing from this conversation, which is really interesting, and it's not necessarily present in every conversation that I have about D&I, is the real need for the government to be involved. And as Lesley said earlier, the way the government actually functions doesn't really lend itself to being able to engage with this properly, but that we still need that buy-in, and we still need that kind of top-down work being done. And it kind of leads me on to the next question that I had for all of you, which is something that I'm always really interested in, that when we talk about D&I and when we talk about the groups that we've got women in STEM, we've got people who are autistic, we've got Black communities and underrepresented communities. What do you think of the idea that we do kind of blanket these things because we have to, right? We say, you know, we're talking about women in STEM, and I've been part of things before, and I've been part of debates before, you know, as a woman talking to other women, where I say, no, like, we are oppressed, and here's some like facts about it, and they say, no, like, I just don't want to identify that way. And there's a real kind of feeling of, if I identify that way, it's almost like a weakness or something. So I just wonder, like, you know, for all of you, if you ever meet people who are part of the communities that you're trying to help, or other people who say, like, you can't speak for me, or I feel really differently. I just think there's like a lot of complexity inside D&I that sometimes we don't quite get into. Maybe that's a bit of an uncomfortable question, but anything that you can say about that, I think would be great. Lesley, can I come to you?
Well, I think that comes back to some of the points we have touched on already, which is about looking at things through an intersectional lens, because in order to make good policy, you need to understand, first of all, who are you making the policy for? And if you are making a conscious or maybe even an unconscious decision about who you're excluding and who you're including. So you need to understand what is the remit of your policy, whether that's at national, local, or at an organisational level. And I do think it comes back to a question of social justice, so which is where we started this conversation. But if we say we want to have a thriving economy, we want to have a society that's inclusive, then we do need to have that broader understanding about what that means for all of our citizens to be part of and participate in that. And we will not get it right. We never get everything right anyway, but it's about the intent about how we are trying to level up the playing field. And to Chuck's point, it is recognising that some people right now aren't even on the park. So how do we make sure, therefore, that when we talk about, you know, levelling up or inclusive growth, whatever we want to label it, that we understand the starting point for many communities currently are. You know, we make a lot of assumptions about the use of technology. We make a lot of assumptions about, you know, fuel poverty. We make a lot of assumptions about housing. We really need to understand it's almost back to the whole Maslow's hierarchy of needs. You know, you can't actualize if you haven't taken care of some of those basic elements. And for many communities, you cannot imagine trying to, you know, study, you know, we've seen examples during COVID where, you know, we had people trying to look at stuff on a phone, if one family had a phone, trying to do homework from home. So if we're talking about technology being the great equalizer, then we need to understand, first of all, that it currently isn't very equal, as Chuck has just really well articulated. And how are we going to address that at that basic level? So I think to have the aspiration is the right one, but we need to then be serious about the measures we put in place to actually say that we're going to tackle it. And I think at least by tackling some of those root cause issues, we will actually see improvement across the board, and we will have a bigger pool of talent, and we will have a fairer society. But you have to really go back, I think, and do some good foundation work. And I think a lot of that has not yet really touched so many people that we know that it really should.
Perfect, thank you so much. And Emma, kind of going over to you, do you feel that you know, intersectionality, the neurodivergent community, is just as broad as any other community? And someone has really put a great comment in the chat just there, and I'll just read a tiny bit of it, saying that not all autistics are verbal or high functioning. So there are some that are more visible than others, and I think that's just a great statement. You know, when you're doing the work that you're doing, do you struggle with this idea that you're kind of speaking on behalf of, or your organization is speaking on behalf of autistic people, and then actually there's all these kind of layers under it? What's that like?
I guess it goes back to the comment, if you met one autistic person, you've met one autistic person. Every autistic person is very different. They're unique. They have unique strengths and abilities, and also unique challenges. So it's valuing the person for the skills and abilities they have, and just providing that little bit of support to help them with any challenges. So we value all of our consultants, and we enable them to go into the workplace and fulfill their potential. And we provide the support to enable them to do that. So I think it's all about having the right understanding and I guess, wanting to find out more about that person, just not accepting them as face value, trying to sort of dig deeper and find out what's the person's skills, because everybody has skills and abilities they can bring to the table.
Amazing, thank you. I sort of feel that there's like an analogy of change inside a box, right? Like if you have a level of understanding, so you know what you're bringing into a conversation, you can ask the right questions. But the idea is that you're coming into a conversation to ask questions about what's needed for that person and for their kind of work life. So I suppose that, even kind of boiling down D&I, that's kind of what it comes to, which is having the right language, having the right structures in order to offer flexibility and change and support where it's needed for the individuals. It's like, how do we make the individuals as kind of as blossoming and as exciting as they can be inside of structures that are supportive and not trapping, which sounds very poetic, but it's not that easy to do, really. And Chuks, coming to you, how does all of that feel, you know, the complexity of D&I and the many kind of facets of it?
Yeah, in terms of looking at different needs in society. For example, I look at my past working experience in the homeless sector, work with people who are actually disengaged. Some of them feel that the society have failed them. Some of them feel that there's no place for them in society. But by constant re-engagement and reassurance, then you see this people, I was able to bring some of them back, integrate them back to the society, and to be able to start their tenancy journey and pick up their life from there. I have a lot of fantastic testimony from people on that sort of journey. But if in the first sense, these people are not engaged, how do you know how they feel? How will we be able to solve their problem? So in a nutshell, what I'm trying to buttress here is that there should be that sort of engagement across the board, engagement despite where this person is from. Like you mentioned about the autistic people, those people need to be engaged. They need to be part of what we do. How do they fit into the policy we develop? And in terms of reporting implementation, what are we doing? Are we really doing much to make sure that these people are not excluded? It's a very funny situation that these people are deprived, disadvantaged in certain area, and in terms of the policy we make ourselves, we also put them out at a disadvantaged position as well. So we need to be, how do we want our society to be fair? How do we want Scotland to be a place for everyone to thrive? Is to be able to engage every sector, every different diverse group in what we do. Where we bring out the policy, how does these people benefit from the policy? Then look at the vehicle. What are the vehicles that the government can work with to drive this policy down to the people and work with these people? There is a lot of charity available on the grassroots supporting those people within this sector. But what is the level of support are they getting from the government to be able to do the job? So there is a lot of engagement, inclusion that's needed from the policy decision-making table down to the grassroots to make this Scotland a place for all of us to thrive.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that input. I'm really aware of time. We've only got 5 minutes left. This is like flown by, which is saying a lot for 3 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon. It's been absolutely fantastic to speak to all of you. And I think I'll just leave you on one more question, which I always like to ask as a bit of I know that there was a person there that said that it wasn't controversial. I really appreciate that. I'm going to try again, which is that, do you really believe that we can make an equal, diverse and inclusive society and workforces? Do you believe that with the kind of structure and the general society that we live in now, even though you three are part of fantastic organizations doing fantastic things and you are pushing that needle and moving it, do you really believe that it's possible that we can create the society that we all dream of? I'm so sorry I even asked that. Lesley, can I come to you?
Well, yes, I do. I think you have to be optimistic. And I go back to the point about leadership that we touched on right at the start, because everyone on this session today has the opportunity to be a leader when they go back to their workplace. So, you know, hopefully today's discussion might have switched on your antenna, you know, to some of these wider issues that you might not typically have thought about in your workplace. And how do you then, you know, take that and raise that as a conversation point within your organisation? It's by having these conversations that we affect change. You know, the trade union movement is a great example of how you affect change, which is you get people to come together to talk about issues and then, you know, to take things forward. But, you know, in the absence of that, there's nothing to stop, you know, human beings engage with each other. We should be having these conversations, and there are so many things that you can do, just for example, to make, you know, workplace better in terms of including women. You know, don't make sexist comments. Think about when you're organising an event outside of work that it's not always at the pub or the golf course. Think about people who've got caring responsibilities. You know, think about, you know, people who might not like noisy environments in terms of being able to interact. Think about people who might not have a lot of money and can't afford to go to venues like that. So there's lots of things we can do as individuals that just get us to switch, you know, a little bit of a wider look at our current world, the world we live in, the world we work in. And the question then for each of us here as part of this today as well, what's your takeaway from today and what you're going to go back and try to affect differently? Because if each of us did something, that would make a huge impact. We can certainly wait for policy, but leadership starts with all of us. So I would just encourage us all to go and be leaders in our workplace.
Thank you so much, and thanks for the optimism. I probably needed that. And Chuks, how about you? Do you believe it's possible?
Thank you very much. Yeah, it's possible, because at the moment, some organizations are doing fantastically well, like the Data Lab, creating a community, bringing everybody together. That's a very good starting point. We are seeing organizations like Public Health Scotland driving this initiative to everyone to be part of the digital strategy. We are seeing a Heart Football Club engaging with diverse community and to see how they can get everybody together. Also, there is still a lot to do. So there is a hope from what other some organizations are doing. And there are many at the moment who are singing this diversity and inclusion. But there are so many who are just taking the bus. So we shouldn't be tired. We just keep on sending the message across and provide a transparent way to be able to monitor what organizations are doing. It's not just about jumping to the bandwagon for others to sing the same chorus, but what are you doing on your own? So yeah, there is hope, and I hope that we'll be better than what we have now. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm glad to hear you're also hopeful and optimistic. And Emma, how about you? How are you feeling?
For me, it's thinking about the difference between equality of treatment and equality of opportunity. A lot of people think that an equal society is treating everybody the same, but it's important that people make adjustments to give everybody the equal opportunity to succeed in whatever they're doing. So I guess what gives me hope is the number of people who are out there educating people about the importance of equality, diversity and inclusion. Because I think the more people who understand why it's important, the closer we'll get to being a fair and inclusive society.
I love that. Thank you, Emma. And I think maybe just as a final word for me, kind of coming off of that, is it's so great that everyone here came to this webinar, and we really appreciate you joining us this afternoon. But don't just come, you know, have conversations afterwards and be, I always like to say, be really annoying in your companies, because someone has to be. And it's better, particularly if we have privilege, which, you know, I do, for example, be annoying because you can afford to be where other people can't. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Thank you again to Lesley, Chuks and Emma for joining me and having this conversation. I had a great time and I learned so much from you all. So really, really appreciate it. Everyone else, it's exactly 4 o'clock. Thank you for joining. Have a lovely rest of your Tuesday and rest of your week, and speak to you soon, I'm sure. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for inviting us. Bye.
Bye.